Well, hello again. As it's already been stated, it's so good to be together this morning. I'm thankful for you and that we get to do this. And this morning, it's a topic I haven't really talked much about in the last 11 years or so. And it begins with attraction. Attraction is kind of a perplexing action. It's the power of evoking interest, pleasure, or a liking for someone or something. That's the Oxford Dictionary version of that. Even strangers, just how powerful it is. It's one of those, you can't see it, right? We can't visibly see attraction, but we all feel it for one thing or another, or one person or another. And it's powerful, it's invisible to the eye, but this action of being drawn towards something or someone, and it's amazing how powerful that can be. Human beings are strangely beautiful creatures, man. And this is another one of those things that I think about. These invisible attributes that we have, that God creates us, and in part of that creating, we are inwardly drawn towards other human beings or other things or ideas. And what really blows my mind is that they aren't all the same things. Some here are attracted and drawn towards sports. Others of us, not so much. Some towards Italian food. Some Mexican food. And I know it's hard to understand or believe, but some people don't even like Mexican food. And that's crazy. Oh, in Spanish, that's loco. But attraction is strangely unique, as we're all in varying degrees of attraction or attracted to something else. But we do share many of the same attractions. Everyone here is attracted to or drawn towards God. The proof of that is that you're here. We all have that in common, and we're attracted to one another in our fellowship to God and our friendships. As you always notice, there are some people that you gravitate more toward than others because there are qualities about them that you're attracted to. Many of us like the same music. Many of us like the same sports teams, same restaurants, movies, and etc. Attraction is a wonderfully human quality that's powerful, and in and of itself, it's a beautiful thing. But like all things human, there's always a dark side to a good thing, and that is where temptation comes in. When attraction to what God has forbidden becomes the focus of our wants, it is no longer simply attraction. It is now qualified to be or classified as temptation. And since the beginning of all time, but since the beginning of all things, Satan has set out to distort and pervert and twist all that God declared good. Understand that things that tempt us may have started out in God's creation as something good, but Satan has a way of taking those things and twisting them, almost making a mirror image and laying it out in a way that's bad. The use of natural attraction to otherwise good things, Satan makes those things temptations to leave God's purpose, or by definition, to sin. And so literally every good thing that is perfectly aligned with God as a good thing can be transformed into an evil thing. This is what Satan does. For an example, food. Food is essential to life. And in the beginning, God said, "Behold, I have given to you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit of the tree yielding its seed, it shall be food for you." God called this good. We even see after the flood in Genesis 9, every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. As is with the green plant, I give all to you. We have to have food to survive. It's essential to life. God called it in the creation good. But when tempted to overeat, when we're tempted to indulge, the natural attraction to food then becomes a sin. In the Old Testament, it's called gluttony. And gluttony, by definition, is the habitual greed. Think of it that way. Gluttony is habitual greed for food and excess for eating as a practice. When food becomes an idol, it's no longer good. And rather than being attracted to food, we're tempted into sin. Another one to consider is family. This one might be hard to grip and hard to understand because I think everyone here recognizes how important family is. However, family is something God had for us in mind from the beginning. In Genesis chapter 1, again, verse 27 this time, it says, "And God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them. God said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Go make more. Make a family.'" And then we see later in the Psalms, David says in Psalm 127, "Behold, children are an inheritance of Yahweh. Fruit of the womb is reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth." How blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. They will not be ashamed when they speak with enemies in the gate. Family was part of God's plan. However, when love for our family is placed over or in front of our love for God, it becomes idolatry as well. Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 10. "He who loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." The temptation in loving our families more than God is what we won't do. That's where the temptation comes in, the things that we won't do that might be required. That when my love for family is more than I love God, maybe I won't give correction when it's necessary. Maybe I won't address problems when they need to be addressed. Maybe I'll just be in denial because I don't want to upset or offend or somehow intrude on the flow of my family dynamic. But the truth is, what God says requires that I can't place the love for my family over the love for Him and His Word. And the temptation of love of our families can do that. Rather than obeying God, we disobey. And so our family can also become a temptation. Something that was created good can sometimes become an idol. And I think probably most obvious is what Satan has done is with intimacy. Intimacy between human beings that God said was good. Again, back in Genesis chapter 1, God created man in His own image. In the image of God He created him. Male and female He created them. God blessed them and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish in the sea and over the birds of the sky and every living thing that creeps on the earth." And then God said, "Behold, I've given you every plant yielding its seed on the surface of the earth." And that goes on into what we just read. But notice this. Notice what he says. Notice how he closes out the statements in verse 31. God saw all that He made, and behold, it was good. When you go back to verse 28, when he said, "Be fruitful and multiply," that involves intimacy. And God said, "That's good." God said that is good. Intimacy is reserved for marriage, however. The very thing that God gave humanity to emulate Him in unity, the expression of love, the reaffirmation of the bond created in marriage is something that we would naturally be attracted to. But Satan found a way to tempt us to leave what God said was good, once again for idolatry. Paul addresses this in Romans chapter 1. I don't have the whole chapter up here. I've just got a few key verses up here, but I do want us to read this together. In Romans chapter 1, starting in verse 18, Paul says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. And since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, both His eternal power and divine nature, have clearly been seen, being understood through all that's been made, so they're without excuse. For even though they knew God," that is some strong AC, man. Even though they knew God, they did not glorify him as God nor give thanks, and they became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools in exchange for the glory of the incorruptible God for an image of the likeness of the corruptible man, of the birds and the four-footed animals and crawling creatures. Therefore God gave them over in the lust of their hearts to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. For they exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason God gave them over to dishonorable passions, for their females exchanged the natural function of that which is unnatural. And in the same way also the males abandoned the natural function of the female, and burned in their desire toward one another, males with males, committing indecent acts and receiving in their own persons their due penalty of error. And just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them over to an unfit mind, to do those things which are not proper, having been filled with all unrighteousness and wickedness, greed and evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, violent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, and without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. And although they know the righteous requirement of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but they give hearty approval to those who practice them. That passage always is like a 2x4 to the face, because when I look out my view, my perspective into the world, this is what I see. It's run rampant. Satan has taken something that God called good and turned it on its head. Trading what was created by the Creator for what was created by the creature. Multiple partners, out of wedlock, out of covenant, same-sex partners, engaging in homosexual acts, exchanging the natural for the unnatural, and the temptation rages on, but you see that these are very obvious and very blatant perversions of what God called good. Something that we would naturally be attracted to, Satan has made a temptation for us. To take what's good and make it something sinful. And while these are all obvious, sometimes they're not obvious. Sometimes our temptations are not so obvious. Sometimes it's in the smallest ways that Satan tempts us and deceives us into thinking that we're doing the right thing. I think sometimes we focus so much on the visible temptations and the visible sins. We forget about those sins that whisper. I've had a lesson on that in the past where we talk about things like envy and greed and jealousy and hate. Those aren't sins that are readily visible, so we don't really think about those so much, but equally condemning. And just like food and family and intimacy have been turned on their head, there's so much more than that, things that we don't see. I'm going to give you two examples using men and women. In men, I don't think anyone here would disagree that men should be masculine. It's the way we were created. It's the role that we have been trusted with. And to clarify, masculine doesn't mean steroid-raised alpha bro. It means that which is consistent with being male. And as much as the world will tell you that there's no difference between men and women, there absolutely are distinct differences between the two sexes. Yes, there are only two. Make no mistake. And one of those is that men are to be masculine. 1 Corinthians 16:13, right here. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, and act like men. Be strong, Paul says. This is good. This is right, and more importantly, it's a command from God through Paul to the Corinthian Christians, and by extension us also, that Men, we need to be strong. We need to act like men. We need to be masculine. Here's where the temptation comes in. When Paul finishes that sentence with be strong, we tend to take that way too far. The greatest lie ever told to men is that pain is what makes you strong. No pain, no gain, right? What a lie that is. There's something much more powerful than pain. It's real. Pain is real. But to believe that pain makes you strong, it's not that it can't, it can. But more often than that, it makes us callous and unemotional. And our excuse is, well, I'm just a man. And Satan knew to attack the tenderness of young boys in the guise of masculinity. That as parents, we wouldn't let them show any emotions to make sure they were masculine. That when he gets hurt physically, we tell him to suck it up. To get up and be tough. Be strong, not realizing that as he grows into a man and matures and then gets hurt emotionally, what he's been trained to do is push that hurt down and be tough. And we create a generation of men that feel nothing. Satan knows he'll have more favor to make him a warrior of physical force than a lover with a tender spirit. Satan knows that if we're lovers, men, Satan knows that if we're lovers, we would be an unstoppable force in the kingdom of God, but we are fighters instead. And I'm not suggesting to you that that's a bad thing in and of itself. But as fighters, Satan knows it's incredibly difficult not to give in to the full force of anger and wrath, making me an unrestrained man of war. He knows that, and he counts on it, that we be tempted to give in to rage and callousness in the name of masculinity. We must resist the temptation of unfeeling and callousness. Real men, real masculinity is not my physical strength, but about my ability to restrain it. Yes, every man should be a monster underneath the surface, just under the surface. But that surface should be made of the strongest of all truths, and it's not pain, it's love. Paul says, let all that you do be done in love. Life is pain, no doubt. But love is stronger than pain. And for the women, I had to do some reading for this because I'm not a woman. Yes, I know the difference. But it's not too different than the temptation for men to be callous. But for women, according to the Jesuit School of Religion and Psychological Sciences, rather than being callous, the temptation for women is control. That might be a shock to some of you men in here, but probably not. The modern world struggles with the idea of women, wives in particular, in being submissive to their husbands. Maybe in part is because of the definition of submissive is somehow seen as less than or not equal to by modern minds, but that's not true. In reality, it has nothing to do with being either of those. It was actually ascribed as protection. If we go back to Genesis again, the fall of the garden, God pronounced Eve's consequences in verse 16 of chapter 3. He says, I will greatly multiply your pain and conception. And in pain you will bear children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Most interpret this to mean that the woman would desire to be in control of her husband, and that he would be the master. But the verse finishes, but he will rule over you. This idea is because of the protection needed for the woman. When Satan came to the garden looking to stir up trouble, he didn't go to Adam. He went to her. And the temptation, according to the study conducted by the Jesuit School of Psychological Sciences, is to be in control. And because women are often smarter than men, we know that. And better at multitasking, we know that. Certainly in my house, that's the case. I am good for about one thing at a time, maybe. But honestly, women can do things more efficiently than their husbands most of the time. But here's the thing, your performance is not what God is interested in. It's your obedience. That's what he wants. These and other temptations that we wrestle with often live just under the surface. And they're masked as choices. Rather than seeing as temptations, they're masked as choices. And here's the thing, the devil doesn't come to us with chains. The devil comes to us with choices. But make no mistake, those choices are just links to a chain. He offers us a link, and then another, and then another. And then what Satan gets away with is not only tempting us right into the bondage of sin, what he takes are the links of the chains disguised as choices, and he makes us build our own chain into bondage. He makes us build our own chains into the slavery of sin. So what do we do? How do we break the chains of sin that temptation builds for us? James said it this way. He says, let no one say that when he's tempted, I'm being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. And when lust is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is fully matured, it brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my brothers. Every good thing given and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shifting shadow. Know this, James is telling us to remember that God is not the one who tempts. Satan takes the good and natural things that we are attracted to in this life and twists them to lure us away. These here in this passage are referred to as lusts. That when I'm tempted and enticed to engage beyond temptation, it is me who's responsible. But if I resist, by expecting the temptation to come, I think sometimes that's where we fall, is that we don't expect it. We're not expecting temptation to come. And as Peyton read for us from the scripture reading, take heed. Take heed. If I'm expecting the temptation to come and planning for it accordingly, when that moment comes, I fight and I win. I win the moment. James says, blessed is he who does so, for he will receive the crown of life. But more than that, I'm reminded that no temptation has overtaken you but such as common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow us to be tempted beyond what we're able, but with the temptation will provide the way of escape also, so that we will be able to endure it. Everybody deals with this. We are all tempted by one thing or another, maybe visible, maybe not so visible. Men, women, and children alike. This is the war that Satan has declared on us, but God has made sure I can escape. The question is, will you choose it? This morning, I don't know what your situation is, but you can rest assured Satan will not rest until he has tempted all of us to the point of breaking. And so this morning, if you're here and you're struggling with temptation, you're battling, know this first, you don't have to do it alone. And if you have fallen and you've begun to build your chain of bondage with the choices that Satan has given you, let it go. Set it down, let it go. You don't have to. If you need to become a Christian, or you just need the prayers of the congregation, whatever it is, let it be known now.